My name is Evelyn Foster. I'm 36 years old, and the moment I realized my relationship was already over didn't come with a fight, or a confession, or even raised voices. It came with a sentence. I think I found someone who fits me better. At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant by better. Now I do. Ethan Carter was 34. We had been together for 7 years. Not married, but close enough that most people assumed it was just a matter of time. We owned a modest house on the east side of Portland, shared bills, shared routines, shared a life that, on paper, made perfect sense. No children, just a golden retriever and a rhythm that worked. At least it used to. I work as a logistics manager for a regional shipping company. My days start before sunrise, solving problems before trucks even leave their loading docks. I like structure. I like knowing what comes next. I like systems that work. Ethan used to say that was one of the things he admired about me. He also used to say it was the thing that made me predictable. He was a freelance lifestyle photographer. His world ran on late nights, last-minute bookings, spontaneous trips, and conversations that stretched far past midnight. For years, we balanced each other out. Stability and spontaneity, order and chaos, until chaos started sounding more appealing than balance. Looking back now, the shift didn't happen all at once. It started about 8 months earlier, when Ethan began using a word I hadn't heard from him before. Stuck. Not unhappy, not angry. Just stuck. I feel like I'm living the same day over and over, he told me one Saturday morning, scrolling through his phone while his coffee went cold. I remember glancing at him, confused. We have a good life, I said carefully. He nodded. Yeah, that's the problem. At the time, I thought he was just restless. Creative people get like that sometimes. They crave change, stimulation, something new. What I didn't realize was that someone had already been feeding that restlessness. Kara, Ethan's younger sister. Kara liked to call herself free-spirited, which mostly meant she rotated through jobs, apartments, and relationships every 6 months while posting quotes online about living without limits. For years, Ethan treated her like she was fearless. I always thought she was just unstable. Somewhere along the way, her voice got louder in his head than mine. She says people like us settle too early, Ethan mentioned once, casually, like he was commenting on the weather. People like us? I asked. People who choose safety over experience. I didn't respond to that. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I could already feel something shifting underneath the surface. The language wasn't his anymore. It sounded borrowed, rehearsed, like he was slowly becoming someone else. Then came the sentence I couldn't forget. Some people are meant to build safe lives, he said one morning, still staring at his phone. And some people are meant to chase exciting ones. I remember standing there, holding a mug I hadn't even taken a sip from yet. And which one do you think you are? I asked. He didn't answer right away. But he didn't have to, because about a month later, I got my answer. It was a Tuesday night. I remember that because Tuesdays were always the most forgettable part of my week. I got home around 7, fed the dog, reheated leftovers, and opened my laptop to finish a few emails. Everything felt normal, routine, safe. Ethan walked into the kitchen about 20 minutes later, and I knew something was wrong before he even said a word. It was the way he stood there, still, composed, watching me like he was preparing for a conversation he had already rehearsed. Are you okay? I asked. He exhaled slowly. I need more than okay. That was how it started. Not with emotion, not with hesitation, with a speech. Carefully constructed, almost clinical. He talked about growth, about alignment, about how people evolve and outgrow versions of themselves. Every sentence sounded like it had been borrowed from somewhere else. Maybe Kara, maybe someone new. I let him talk. He said he felt trapped by routine. He said our relationship had become predictable. He said he had spent years being the responsible partner, and now he needed to choose himself. Then he paused, and that was when everything shifted. There's someone I met, he said, my hands stilled on the keyboard. Nothing serious happened, he added quickly. Not technically, but I feel something real. I looked at him. Who? He hesitated for half a second. Then he said her name. Rhea. The photographer Kara had introduced him to at some gallery event downtown. Of course. She understands me, he continued. She's spontaneous, creative. She sees the world differently. Different from me. That part didn't need to be said. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. That seemed to irritate him. And that was when the mask slipped. You've gotten too comfortable, Evelyn, he said, his voice sharper now. You treat life like a schedule. Like if everything runs on time, that means it's working. I didn't respond. Just because you keep everything stable doesn't mean it's enough, he added. There it was. Not confusion, not doubt, contempt, dressed up as self-discovery. I closed my laptop slowly. So what are you saying? I asked. He met my eyes directly. I think Rhea is the better option. The words hung in the air between us. Cold, precise, final. And the way he said it, like he was stating a logical conclusion instead of ending a 7-year relationship, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. I nodded once. When are you leaving? He looked almost relieved that I didn't argue. I already packed some things, he said. I'll stay with Kara for a bit. Of course he would. That should have been my first clue about how long this had been planned. He talked about taking things slow, about doing it the right way, which apparently meant moving in stages, so it didn't look like he was leaving one relationship for another. The mental gymnastics were impressive. Does she know about me? I asked. He rolled his eyes slightly. Of course she does. She respects that I'm handling this maturely. Mature. That word again. As if dismantling a life piece by piece somehow made it responsible. He went upstairs to grab the rest of his things. 15 minutes later, he came back down with 2 suitcases and his camera bag. He paused at the door. Then he said something I would remember long after he left. Someday you'll understand that people deserve more than settling. Settling. That was what our life had become to him. A placeholder. A safe option. Something temporary until something better came along. He walked out without looking back. And just like that, the life we built together ended in silence. The strange thing about endings like that is how quiet they feel afterward. No dramatic collapse. No shattered glass or raised voices echoing through the house. Just absence. Ethan's side of the closet half empty, his shoes missing from the hallway. The faint outline on the kitchen counter where his camera bag used to sit. 7 years reduced to negative space. The first few days I moved through the house like I was adjusting to a new layout. Not grieving, not angry, just recalibrating. I kept my routine exactly the same. 4:30 a.m. alarm, coffee, feed the dog, out the door by 5:20. Work didn't change. Trucks still needed schedules. Problems still needed solving. Life, at least on the surface, continued. But then Kara started texting. At first, it was subtle. 3 days after Ethan left, she sent a photo. No message, just an image. Ethan and Kara standing at a scenic overlook somewhere outside the city. A river cutting through the valley behind them, mountains in the distance. Ethan had one arm stretched out, holding his phone, wind pushing his hair back. He looked different. Lighter. Like someone who had just stepped into a version of himself he had been rehearsing for months. Kara leaned into the frame beside him, smiling like she was documenting proof of something. The caption came a second later. Finally living the life he deserves. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I locked my phone without responding. Over the next 2 weeks, the updates kept coming. Not constantly, just enough to make sure I saw them. Photos, little comments, casual mentions dropped into conversations like they weren't intentional. Ethan and Rhea drove out to the mountains at sunrise today. Oh, last-minute trip to this tiny coastal town. No plans, just vibes. He looked so much happier now. It was almost impressive. The consistency, the effort. Kara wasn't just sharing updates. She was building a narrative. And the strange part? She seemed more invested in proving Ethan's new life was perfect than Ethan did. Because Ethan himself barely contacted me at all. One message about the dog. Is he eating okay? Another about a file on the desktop. Can you send me that Lightroom folder? No apologies. No explanations. Just logistics. Like we had already transitioned into something transactional. 3 weeks after he left, he finally came back to the house. He texted first. I need to pick up the rest of my clothes. I'll come by around 6. Not a question. A statement. At 6:12, a black Jeep pulled into the driveway. I saw it through the front window. For a moment, I just stood there, watching. Then Ethan got out of the passenger side. And for the first time, I saw her. Rhea. She stayed in the driver's seat, one hand resting casually on the steering wheel. Sunglasses pushed up into her hair even though the sun was already setting. Confident. Relaxed. Like she belonged exactly where she was. Ethan walked up to the door and let himself in, like nothing had changed. Hey, he said. I nodded. Your stuff's upstairs. He moved through the house quickly, efficiently. No hesitation, no nostalgia. Like he was packing up an apartment he had already emotionally vacated months ago. I stayed downstairs. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. 15 minutes later, he came back down, carrying 2 boxes. He paused near the kitchen, glancing around briefly. Place looks the same, he said. It is, I replied. There was a short silence. Then he shifted his weight slightly. I think this is better for both of us, he said. In the long run. I didn't respond. We were different people, he continued. We just didn't want to admit it. Different. That word again. Carefully chosen. Detached. As if what we had could be reduced to a mismatch instead of a decision. I hope eventually we can look back and see this as a good thing, he added. Like we both ended up where we were supposed to be. I met his eyes. And where is that? I asked. He hesitated for just a second. Then he said it. With people who actually match us. Compatible. Aligned. The language was still there. Still not his. Still rehearsed. I nodded slowly. Then I guess you got what you wanted. Something flickered across his face at that. Not guilt. Not regret. Just discomfort. Like the conversation wasn't following the script he expected. I didn't mean it like that, he said quickly. I didn't argue. Instead, I picked up one of the boxes and walked it toward the front door. I'll help you, I said. We carried the rest of his things out in silence. When we stepped outside, Rhea glanced over from the driver's seat. She gave me a small nod. Polite. Neutral. Like we were two strangers acknowledging each other in passing. Ethan loaded the boxes into the back of the Jeep. Then he turned back to me. For what it's worth, I do want you to be happy, Evelyn. I almost smiled at that. Not because it was kind. Because it sounded like something people say when they've already convinced themselves they're not the one responsible for the damage. I will be, I said simply. He nodded. Then he got into the passenger seat. The Jeep pulled out of the driveway a few seconds later. And just like that, he was gone again. For good this time. Or at least, that's what I thought. The next few weeks were quiet. No more updates from Kara. No more messages from Ethan. Just silence. Real silence this time. And slowly, something inside me started to settle. Not heal. Not yet. But stabilize. I stopped expecting my phone to light up. Stopped replaying conversations in my head. Stopped wondering if I had missed something along the way. Because the truth was simple. He didn't leave because something was broken. He left because he believed something better was waiting. And people who think like that don't usually look back. At least, not right away. It was almost 2 months later when my phone rang one night, 10:40 p.m. Kara. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Her name hadn't shown up in weeks. And for a moment, I considered ignoring it. Because calls from Kara only ever meant one of two things. Bragging. Or blame. But something about the time made me pause. So I answered. Hello? The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not on the line. In her voice. Kara was never quiet. She was loud, confident, always sounding like she was performing for an audience, even over the phone. But that night, she sounded different. Evelyn, are you home? She asked. I frowned slightly. Yes. Are you alone? That was when something shifted. A small, sharp instinct at the back of my mind. What do you want, Kara? There was a pause, long enough to feel deliberate. Then she exhaled. Ethan needs a place to stay. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. 2 months. That was how long the better option lasted. What happened to Rhea? I asked. Silence. Longer this time. Then she said carefully, they're having some issues. Issues. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Define issues. Kara hesitated. Then the story started to unravel. Apparently, the spontaneity Ethan found so exciting came with conditions he hadn't considered. Rhea traveled constantly, sometimes for weeks at a time. She liked independence, space, freedom. And somewhere along the way, Ethan had started treating their situation like something more permanent, more structured, more predictable. The exact thing he said he didn't want anymore. She thinks things move too fast, Kara continued. She just needs some time. I didn't interrupt. She asked him to take his things and give her space, she added. Space. The same word, the same tone, the same justification. I closed my eyes for a brief second, not out of emotion, out of recognition. Where is he now? I asked. At my place, Kara said quickly. But it's not ideal. My landlord's already complaining. It's just temporary. Of course it was. Everything was always temporary until it wasn't. So you're calling me because... I prompted. Kara's voice tightened slightly. Because he's still your partner. Was. But I didn't correct her. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. And what exactly does Ethan want? Another pause. Then more quietly this time. He wants to know if he can come back. Just for a little while. There it was. Not regret. Not reconciliation. Convenience. The backup plan. I let the silence stretch for a few seconds. Then I said very calmly, no. The silence on the other end of the line didn't feel surprised. It felt offended. Like I had just violated some unspoken agreement that no one had actually discussed, but everyone assumed would hold. No? Kara repeated, slower this time, like she needed to hear it again to process it properly. No, I said again, not louder, not harsher, just clearer. Another pause. Then the shift happened. The tone changed first. "Well, that's a little cold, don't you think?" she said, her voice tightening just enough to lose its earlier hesitation. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dark reflection of my living room window. "I don't," I replied. "He doesn't have anywhere else to go right now," she continued quickly. "It would just be for a few days, maybe a week, until things settle down." Settle down. The same phrasing Ethan used when he left. The same vague promise of temporary disruption that somehow justified permanent decisions. I didn't interrupt her. I let her keep going. "We're not asking for anything unreasonable," she added. "You two are still together. Technically." There it was. Not emotional, not personal. Technical. Like this was a contract dispute instead of a collapsed relationship. I exhaled slowly. 2 months ago, I said, Ethan stood in this house and told me he found a better option. Kara didn't respond. "He packed his things, walked out the door, and left with her," I continued. "He made a mistake," she cut in quickly. "People do that." "Maybe," I said, "but some mistakes aren't temporary." Her patience snapped just slightly. "So you're just going to leave him out there?" she asked, "after everything you've had together?" I almost smiled at that. Not because it was ironic, because it was predictable. "Why are you calling me Kara?" I asked quietly. A beat, then irritation. "Because you're the only one who can help right now." "No, because I was the only one who used to." "Where is he?" I asked. "In my living room," she said. "He's been sitting there all night. He's not doing great." I pictured it for a moment. Ethan, sitting somewhere unfamiliar, waiting. Not for understanding, for access. "He's been asking what to do," Kara continued. "He doesn't have a plan." I closed my eyes briefly. That part didn't surprise me. Because people who leave stability for excitement rarely think about what happens when excitement ends. "Did he ask you to call me?" I asked. Another pause. "Too long." "No," she admitted finally. "But he wants to talk to you." Of course he did. Now, when there was something to fix. "No," I said again. "Evelyn." "No," I repeated, cutting her off this time. "There's nothing he can say that changes the situation. He just wants to explain," she insisted. "He feels terrible." I let out a quiet breath. "Explanations matter before someone leaves," I said, "not after." That landed. I could hear it in the way her breathing changed on the other end. Then came the push. "You're being bitter," she said flatly. "No," I replied. "I'm being clear." "He didn't cheat on you," she added quickly. "He was honest." I almost laughed at that. Honest. That was the word she chose. "He told you before anything serious happened," she continued. "That counts for something." I stared at the ceiling for a second, then back at the window. "He told me he found someone better," I said. "That's not honesty. That's a decision." Silence again. This time, heavier. "She's not even in the picture anymore," Kara said finally, her voice lower now. "Doesn't that change anything?" "No." It clarified everything. "No," I said. Another pause. Then she tried a different angle. "If you really cared about him," she said slowly, "you'd help him when things are hard, not just when they're easy." I let that sit for a moment. Then I asked quietly, "Did he say that?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because that told me everything. Ethan wasn't even part of this conversation. Not really. He was sitting somewhere waiting for the outcome, while someone else negotiated for him. "I'm not talking to him tonight," I said. "You're really not even going to hear him out?" she asked. "No. He deserves a chance to explain." "He had one," I replied. "The night he left." Kara exhaled sharply. "You're acting like this is permanent." "It is," I said. That was the moment the last bit of patience disappeared from her voice. You're being petty," she snapped. "People make mistakes. Marriages survive worse than this." "We're not married," I said calmly. "That's not the point." No," I said, "it is. Because if we had been married, maybe there would have been something formal to undo. Something legal, something binding. But what we had ended the moment he redefined it. He said you weren't enough," I continued quietly. "Not in those exact words, but that's what better option means." "He didn't mean it like that." "He said it," I cut in. "That's what matters." Silence. Then softer, almost reluctant. "He has nowhere else to go." There it was. The truth. Stripped of argument. Stripped of justification. Just reality. I nodded to myself even though she couldn't see it. "That's unfortunate," I said. "Evelyn, I'm not his safety net," I added. Her voice sharpened again. "So that's it? 7 years and you just shut the door?" I let that question hang for a second, then answered it honestly. "I didn't shut the door," I said. "He walked out of it." That one hit. I could feel it, because she didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was quieter, more controlled. "He thought he was choosing something better," she said. "I know," I replied. "And now he knows he was wrong." I tilted my head slightly. Then he learned something, I said. That's not how relationships work, she snapped. No, I said, that's exactly how they work. Choices. Consequences. No guarantees. She went silent again. For longer this time. Then finally, so you're really not going to help him? I didn't hesitate. No. A sharp inhale on the other end. Then one last attempt. He might lose everything. I stared at my reflection in the window. Then said the only thing that felt true. He already did. Click. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, setting it on the table beside me. And for the first time since Ethan walked out of that house 2 months earlier, everything felt settled. Not resolved. Not healed. But defined. Clear. Final. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because the next morning, when I opened my front door to leave for work, there were 3 suitcases sitting on my porch, and Ethan was sitting right beside them. For a moment, I thought I was still half asleep. The early morning air was cold, the kind that makes everything feel sharper than it should. My coffee was still warm in my hand, keys in the other, routine carrying me forward without thought, until I saw him, Ethan, sitting on my front porch like he had been there for a while. 3 suitcases lined up neatly beside him, the same ones he packed the night he left. The black one, the gray roller, the tan case with his camera gear. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he stood up quickly. Evelyn. I didn't respond. I stepped fully outside and closed the door behind me. Not slammed. Just closed. A boundary. He took a step forward, words already rushing out. I know this looks bad, he said. I didn't know where else to go. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't have anything to say. Because I wanted him to hear himself. Kara hadn't exaggerated. He didn't look like the version of himself from those photos. No wind in his hair. No careless confidence. No curated excitement. Just someone tired. Unsteady. Like the ground underneath him had shifted without warning. I tried calling, he continued quickly. You didn't pick up. I know, I said. That seemed to throw him off for a second. I needed to see you, he added. See me. Not apologize. Not explain. See. His eyes flicked toward the house behind me. Then back to me. I'm sorry, he said. There it was. The word he hadn't used once the night he left. Now it came out easily. Too easily. I made a mistake, he continued. I didn't understand what I had. I let him talk. Not because I believed it. Because I wanted to hear how far he would go. I thought I needed something different, he said. Something more exciting. But it wasn't real. Not the way I thought it was. Rhea. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. I should have listened to you, he added. I should have appreciated what we had. What we had? Past tense. Convenient. I let Kara get in my head, he said quickly. She kept telling me I deserved more, that I was settling, that there were better options out there, and I believed it. I watched him carefully. He shifted the blame with precision. Not entirely, just enough to soften his own responsibility. And Rhea, he hesitated. She wasn't who I thought she was. Of course she wasn't. She didn't want anything serious, he continued. Not really. I thought we were building something, but she wanted freedom. Space. No expectations. The same words. Recycled. Returned. I realized it too late, he said quietly. There it was. Not regret. Timing. He looked at me then. Really looked this time. I know I hurt you, he said. I know I don't deserve anything from you right now. But I need somewhere to stay, just for a little while, until I figure things out. There it was. The core of it. Stripped of emotion. Stripped of apology. Nita. I'm not asking for everything to go back to the way it was, he added quickly. I need help. Help. Not us. Not repair. Just access. I let the silence stretch. He shifted again, uncomfortable now. Waiting. Expecting. Because somewhere in his mind, this was the part where I softened. Where 7 years outweighed 2 months. Where history overruled choice. I stepped forward. Not toward the door. Toward the suitcases. He watched me, confusion flickering across his face. I bent down and picked up the largest one. Heavy. Familiar. I set it upright beside the others. Then I straightened and looked at him. This house stopped being your home the day you chose your better option, I said. The words landed slowly. I could see it in his expression. Not anger. Not disbelief. Recognition. Like something he already knew, but hadn't fully accepted yet. That's not what he started. It is, I said calmly. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping in now. I said something stupid, he insisted. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it enough to leave, I replied. That stopped him. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I didn't think it would turn out like this, he said finally. I nodded slightly. I know. That seemed to catch him off guard more than anything else I'd said. No, he repeated. Yes, I said, because this is how it usually goes. Excitement without structure. Freedom without responsibility. It works until it doesn't. Evelyn, please, he said, his voice tightening now. I don't have anywhere else to go. There it was again. Not love. Not regret. Need. He looked past me toward the door, toward the life he walked away from. I just need a few days, he said. A week at most. I'll stay out of your way. I'll figure something out. I held his gaze. Steady. Unmoved. You already figured something out, I said. 2 months ago. That was a mistake, he snapped, frustration breaking through now. Why are you acting like people can't fix things? Because some things aren't meant to be fixed, I said quietly. Silence. The kind that doesn't invite argument. He stared at me for a long moment. Then his voice dropped. So that's it? He asked. You're just done? I thought about that. Not the question. The answer. I was done the night you left, I said. His expression shifted. Something in it cracked. Not dramatically. Just enough. Where am I supposed to go? He asked. The same question. Different tone. Less expectation. More reality. I tilted my head slightly. That's something you should have thought about before you decided you had a better option. It wasn't cruel. It was accurate. He flinched anyway. Then he laughed. Once. Short. Empty. I can't believe this, he muttered. I didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. I stepped past him, walking toward my car. He didn't follow. Didn't try to stop me. Evelyn, he said once more. I paused, not turning around. I really am sorry, he said. I believed him. That was the part that made it simple. Because regret didn't change decisions. And apologies didn't undo choices. I know, I said. Then I got into my car and drove away. For the first time since he walked out of my life, I didn't look back. I expected that to be the end of it. After I drove away that morning, I assumed Ethan would do what everyone eventually does when a door closes. Find another one. Portland isn't a small city. There are always couches, spare rooms, temporary solutions for people willing to look. But what I didn't account for was how many bridges he had already burned. Around noon, my phone started vibrating. Unknown number. I ignored it. A few minutes later, it rang again. Then again. By the fourth call, I answered. Not out of curiosity, just to stop the noise. Hello? Evelyn, his voice. Quieter than before. Controlled. But underneath it, something strained. You borrowed someone's phone? I asked. Yes, he said. Mine died. Of course it did. Temporary problems stacked on top of bigger ones. What do you want, Ethan? I asked. A pause. I just need to talk to you, he said. We already did. Not like this. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my office. We said everything we needed to say this morning. No, we didn't, he insisted. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. Explain. That word again. You had your chance, I said calmly. The night you left. That's not fair, he said quickly. I didn't understand things the way I do now. Understanding after consequences. Convenient. I get it now, he continued. What we had, it meant something. It still does. I didn't respond, because meaning wasn't the issue. Choice was. 7 years, Evelyn, he said, his voice tightening. That doesn't just disappear. He was right. It didn't disappear. It ended. 7 years didn't end today, I said. They ended the moment you decided I wasn't enough. I never said that, he pushed back. You didn't have to, I replied. You said someone else was better. Silence. Longer this time. Then, softer. I was wrong. I believed that too. But belief wasn't the same as reversal. People make mistakes, he added. Relationships survive worse than this. That line again. Recycled. Borrowed. Probably Kara's. As some do, I said. This one didn't. His breathing changed slightly. Slower. He was running out of angles. I don't have anything right now, he said finally. No place, no plan, nothing. There it was. The truth. No framing. No philosophy. Just reality. And for a second, I almost felt something. Not enough to change my mind. Just enough to recognize the weight of it. Then he asked the question. Is this really it? I closed my eyes briefly. Not to think. Because I already knew. Yes, I said. Another silence. This one heavier. Final. Just like that, he asked. No, I said. Not just like that. 7 years didn't end in a moment. They ended in decisions. In words. In choices that did not leave room for return. They ended when you left believing you had something better, I continued. I could hear him breathing on the other end. But he didn't interrupt. And I think you should go find out exactly how good that was, I added. The line stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then, okay, he said. Not agreement. Not acceptance. Just acknowledgement. Then the call ended. I set my phone down and went back to work. Not because I wasn't affected, but because I didn't need to sit in it anymore. Later that afternoon, around 3:15, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Kara. The message was long, longer than anything she had sent before, and the tone completely different. "You're being cruel." That was the first line. I read the rest without reacting. According to her, Ethan had spent the entire morning driving around the city. No destination, no plan, just moving. At some point, he had parked outside a grocery store and stayed there for over an hour. Eventually, he broke down, called her again, asked what to do. I paused there, not because I was surprised, because I wasn't. People like Ethan don't expect consequences. They expect stories, dramatic ones. The kind where they leave, realize their mistake, and come back to a version of life that's been waiting patiently for them. But real life doesn't pause. It moves, with or without them. Kara kept typing. "You're acting like a robot." "You should have some compassion. If you keep doing this, he's going to lose everything." I read that last line twice. Then I typed back, slowly, carefully. "He didn't lose everything today." I paused, then finished the sentence. "He lost it 2 months ago." I hit send. No anger, no hesitation, just clarity. She didn't respond. Not that day. Not after that. About a week later, I heard through a mutual friend that Ethan had rented a small studio apartment across the city. Nothing permanent, just something to get by. Ria never contacted him again. Apparently, she was traveling, posting photos from different countries like nothing had ever happened. Like he had never been part of the story. As for me, I filed the paperwork not long after, not out of anger, out of completion. The strange thing is, when I think about it now, I don't feel bitter. I don't feel angry. I don't even feel sad. I feel clear. Ethan wanted something exciting, something better, something different from the life we built. And he got it. For a while, long enough to realize something most people only understand too late. That stability isn't the absence of excitement. It's the foundation that makes everything else possible. And when you walk away from that, you don't always get to walk back. The lesson I took from all of it is simple. When someone tells you they've found a better option, believe them and let them go. Because sometimes the only way people understand what they lost is by living without it. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 32 years old, and about 7 weeks after I walked away from a relationship that looked completely stable from the outside, I finally understood something I should have recognized much earlier. That when a man starts redefining connection to justify control, the relationship is already over. I just hadn't admitted it yet. Not until that Wednesday night. On paper, Daniel and I made sense. We lived in a clean, modern house about 20 minutes outside Tampa. Floor-to-ceiling windows, neutral tones, everything curated just enough to look effortless. The kind of place people compliment when they don't know you well enough to say anything real. Everything looked balanced, controlled, intentional. I worked as a product manager for a mid-sized fintech company. My life was structured. Deadlines, roadmaps, long planning cycles. I made just over $90,000 a year. Predictable, stable. Daniel was the opposite. More fluid, more expressive. He worked as a freelance designer when we met. Branding packages, social media visuals, small lifestyle startups across South Florida. He was talented, no question about that, but inconsistent. Some months he made more than I did. Other months he barely covered his expenses. He used to call that freedom. I used to call it potential. About a year and a half into our relationship, he started talking about launching his own skincare line, clean ingredients, minimalist branding, something that carried his name. At first, it sounded like a side project. To me, it sounded like a product, so I treated it like one. I asked about margins, supply chain, customer acquisition cost. He rolled his eyes at that. "Claire, you overthink everything," he said once, leaning back in his chair like the answer bored him. "Real entrepreneurs move on instinct." Still, I believed in him. That was my first mistake. I helped him register the company under his name. I built the website myself over weekends. I used my savings to fund the first manufacturing run because he didn't have the capital. I handled supplier contracts, negotiated pricing, set up the back-end systems. Officially, it was his brand. Unofficially, I built the structure that allowed it to exist. And the business worked. Within 8 months, he was making more than freelance had ever brought him. He stopped taking client work, started introducing himself as a founder. At dinners, he would joke, "This is Claire, my unofficial assistant." People laughed. I smiled. I told myself it was harmless. Looking back, that was the first shift. It didn't happen all at once. It was slower than that. like watching someone adjust their posture over months until you realize they're standing differently. When revenue became consistent, he stopped asking for input. In the beginning, we had weekly check-ins at the kitchen table. I would show him spreadsheets. We talked about retention, inventory turnover. After he quit freelance work, those conversations disappeared. Meetings feel corporate, he said. I want to keep things creative. He also started spending more. At first, it made sense. Better product photography, influencer gifting, a part-time assistant. Then it drifted. A new car lease because founders shouldn't drive something basic. Designer outfits for networking events in Miami. A PR consultant that produced no measurable return. I didn't stop him. The company was legally his. I had made sure of that. My involvement was invisible on paper. Just the girlfriend who helped. But the tone in our relationship shifted too. He started correcting me in front of people. If someone complimented the website, he would say he guided the vision and I just implemented it. If someone asked how he scaled so fast, he'd laugh. I had to teach Claire to think bigger. The jokes stopped feeling like jokes. There was always an edge. One night at dinner with my friends, he said something that stayed with me. Ambition is attractive, he said casually. Some people are just comfortable being safe. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't need to. I addressed it that same night, privately. I don't appreciate being minimized in front of people, I told him. He smiled like I had missed the point. You're being sensitive, he said. Confident women don't need constant credit. I didn't argue. I just said I wouldn't sit through that again. That was the first boundary I set. It didn't hold. Around that time, my best friend Ryan started coming around more often. We'd known each other since college. She worked in real estate development. Confident, social. The kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately owned it. Daniel liked that energy. At first, I thought it was harmless. She gets it, Daniel said once. She understands risk, scale, big moves. I didn't feel threatened. I had never been insecure about my friends, but I noticed something. The comparisons. If Ryan talked about a risky deal, Daniel would glance at me. Some people are wired for big swings. If I pointed out downsides, he'd smirk. That's why you work corporate. One weekend, Ryan stayed over. The three of us went out to dinner. Daniel drank more than usual. He spent most of the night debating business with her. At one point, he said something that didn't sit right. I could take this brand national within a year, he said, eyes locked on Ryan. If I had the right partner. I asked what he meant. He smiled. Business partner. But the look he gave me said something else. That night, after Ryan went to the guest room, I said it directly. This dynamic feels off. I'm not accusing you of anything, I added. I'm pointing out the pattern, the comparisons, the way you align with her over me. Daniel laughed. You're imagining competition, he said, because you're threatened. That word, threatened. I felt something settle in my chest, not anger, clarity. If you want a different kind of person, I said quietly, you should say it. He shook his head. You're overanalyzing again. I didn't argue. I went to bed, and I made a decision. I would observe, not react, because I've learned something in my work. Data always surfaces, eventually. I just didn't expect it to surface the way it did. The data surfaced on a Tuesday night, not dramatically, not the way people imagine these things happen. No suspicious messages, no frantic searching, just timing. I was updating the back end of the website, routine maintenance, small fixes. Daniel had gone to what he called a networking mixer in Miami earlier that evening. Ryan had texted me that same afternoon. Funny coincidence, she wrote. I'm in Miami too. Site visit. I didn't think anything of it. Not then. Around midnight, a confirmation email came through. It was tied to the business account, still synced to my laptop because I handled supplier communication. Hotel booking, downtown Miami. 1 king bed. 2 guests. I stared at the screen longer than I want to admit. The booking time was 7:42 p.m., about an hour after Daniel said the event started. I didn't react immediately. I checked the company calendar. No brand events the next morning. No retail meetings. Nothing that required an overnight stay. At 1:15 a.m., my phone lit up. Daniel. Hey, I might just crash at a friend's place in Brickell. Had a couple drinks. Don't want to drive. I read it twice. Then I typed back. That's fine. No confrontation. No accusation. I closed the message and went back to the laptop. Then I did something simple. I called the hotel. I asked to confirm a reservation under his name. They didn't give details, but they confirmed it was active. That was enough. I didn't drive to Miami. I didn't create a scene. I went to bed. The next afternoon, he came home. Calm, relaxed, like nothing had shifted. How was the event? I asked. Good, he said. Productive. Did you stay at a hotel? There was a pause. Just half a second. Then he nodded. Yeah, needed quiet to think. I held his gaze. Alone? Another pause. Then he said it. Yes. I nodded slowly. I saw the reservation, I said. 2 guests. Something changed in his expression. Not guilt. Adjustment. Like he was recalculating the angle. You're making this a bigger deal than it is, he said. Adults can share space without it meaning anything. I let that sit. Then I asked one question. Was it Ryan? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Silence is a form of confirmation. And then he said it, the sentence that ended everything. You're too boring to keep a man like me, Claire. For a moment, I thought I would feel something dramatic. Anger, shock, collapse. But I didn't. Something settled instead. Like a decision that had already been made, finally catching up to reality. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized something I hadn't fully admitted before. He needed an audience, and I had stopped performing. We're done, I said. He blinked. Wait, what? Oh, we're done, I repeated. Not for space, not to think about it. Done. He let out a short laugh. Claire, you're overreacting. It was one night. It wasn't one night, I said calmly. It was a pattern. The comparisons, the disrespect, the alignment. He shook his head. Why, you're stuck in rules. Successful people don't think like that. I didn't argue. I just said what mattered. This is my house. It's in my name. You have 24 hours to pack your things. That got his attention. You're serious? Yes. That's insane. No, I said quietly. It's decisive. He stared at me like he was waiting for negotiation. There wasn't any. I'll change the locks after 24 hours, I added. I'll send it in writing so there's no confusion. He called me dramatic. I didn't respond. I sent the email anyway. Clear, documented, final. And then I did something he didn't expect. The business might have been in his name, but the infrastructure wasn't. I built it. The hosting account, mine. The payment processor connected to my LLC. Supplier contracts negotiated by me, requiring my approval for volume pricing. I had never hidden that. He had just never cared about the details. That night, while he packed, I sat in the living room with my laptop. Not emotional. Methodical. I mapped everything. Hosting. Payment processing. Email marketing systems. CRM. Supplier agreements. Affiliate dashboards. I didn't delete anything. I exported backups. Documented credentials. Created clean separation. The next morning, I called a lawyer friend. I explained the structure. My involvement. The lack of formal contracts tying me to his company. Can I withdraw my systems? I asked. Yes, he said. You're removing your assets, not sabotaging his business. That distinction mattered. I wasn't destroying anything. I was stepping away. Completely. Over the next week, I started unwinding it. Quietly. I canceled the merchant account. 30-day notice. Notified suppliers that future orders would require renegotiation without my volume guarantees. Transferred website files to him with a clear deadline for hosting termination. No drama. No warning beyond what was legally required. Just removal. At first, he didn't notice. Sales were still coming in. Orders still processing. From the outside, everything looked stable. That illusion didn't last. He noticed when payouts paused. When customers started emailing about failed checkouts. That conversation felt different, less confident, more urgent. By then, he was already out of the house. I had changed the locks exactly 24 hours after our conversation, just like I said I would. His things were packed neatly by the door when he came back with his older brother. I stayed the entire time. No shouting, no theatrics, just distance. 3 days later, my phone rang. Daniel, I answered. What's going on with the site? He asked, his voice tighter than before. Payments aren't processing. Customers are complaining. Nothing's wrong, I said. The merchant account tied to my LLC reached its termination date. You can't just pull support like that. I can, I replied calmly. I was never your employee. There was no agreement locking me in. You're trying to destroy me. No, I said. I'm removing myself. There's a difference. There was silence on the other end. Then he said it again. You're being petty because I chose someone more exciting. That word, exciting. I almost smiled. Is Ryan stepping in to rebuild your back end? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then, quieter. He's not technical, but he believes in the vision. Belief. I leaned back slightly. Belief doesn't replace infrastructure, Daniel. And for the first time, he didn't have a response. The shift didn't happen all at once. It never does. From the outside, Daniel's brand still looked intact for a few days after that call. The website was up. Social media still active. Old posts still circulating. But underneath it, things were already breaking. Quietly. I didn't monitor it obsessively. I didn't need to. People talk. Mutual friends started mentioning things without realizing I already knew. "Hey, is Daniel's site glitching?" one of them asked casually over lunch. I tried to order something and it wouldn't go through. I shrugged. "I'm not involved anymore." That was the truth. By the end of that week, the cracks became visible. Customers started posting screenshots of failed checkouts. Comments appeared under his posts. "Is anyone else having issues with payment? I've been trying to order for 2 days. Customer service hasn't responded." The illusion of control started slipping, and Daniel wasn't equipped to handle that kind of pressure alone. He called again. This time, he didn't try to sound composed. "What did you do?" he asked, voice tight, like he was holding something back. "I told you," I said. "I removed my systems. You didn't have to do it like this." "I gave notice," I replied, "in writing." "You knew this would happen." I paused for a moment. "Yes," I said, "I did." Silence. "Then, you're ruining years of my work over one mistake." I let that sit between us. "One mistake doesn't usually involve months of behavior leading up to it," I said quietly. He exhaled sharply. This is about Ryan, isn't it?" "No," I said, "this is about me." He didn't understand the difference. I could hear it in the way he shifted the conversation. "Ryan said you were always like this," he continued. Controlled, calculated, waiting for leverage. That made me pause. Not because it hurt, because it confirmed something. Ryan had been part of the narrative longer than I had allowed myself to believe. "Is he helping you?" I asked. There was a delay. Then, "He's busy right now." Busy, that word did more damage than anything else, because it wasn't just an excuse. It was a pattern. "Daniel," I said calmly, "belief and attention aren't the same thing." He didn't respond, because he already knew. Within another week, things escalated. Suppliers started reaching out to him directly. Without my volume guarantees, pricing shifted. Margins cut almost in half. Minimum order quantities increased. Cash flow tightened. The PR consultant invoice came due. Influencers started asking about delayed affiliate payouts. The structure I had built wasn't just convenience. It was stability. And without it, everything became heavier, more expensive, more fragile. He called again, angrier this time. "You set me up to fail," he said. "No," I replied. "I set you up to succeed. You just didn't understand what that required." "That's not fair." "Neither was what you did." Silence again. Then something changed. His voice dropped. Lower, less aggressive. "Ryan isn't answering my calls." There it was. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Just confirmation. I leaned back in my chair. I'm not surprised," I said. "You knew?" he asked, sharper now. "I understood the type of dynamic you were stepping into." "You don't know him like I do." "No," I said. "I know patterns." That ended the call. After that, he stopped reaching out for a few days. Until Friday. He showed up at my office, unannounced. Security called up. "There's someone here asking for you," they said. "Says it's urgent." I considered saying no, but I didn't want a scene. "I'll meet him in the lobby," I said. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. No carefully styled outfit. No curated confidence. Just tired. His hair pulled back, dark circles under his eyes. For the first time in months, he looked real. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked. He stepped closer. "Ryan told me he needs space," he said. "That things escalated too fast." I didn't respond. He said he thought I understood that this wasn't serious. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Daniel hesitated. "I thought we were building something." I studied him for a moment. "You were," I said. "Just not what you thought." "That's cold." "No," I said quietly. "That's accurate." He looked at me like he was trying to find something familiar, something he could still control. Then he shifted. "Can you just reconnect the payment system?" he asked. "Temporarily, a couple weeks, just until I figure things out." There it was. Not apology. Not accountability. Request. "I can't do that," I said. "Why not?" "Because the system is tied to my LLC," I replied. "If something goes wrong, chargebacks, unpaid suppliers, it comes back to me." "You think I'd let that happen?" I held his gaze. "I think I don't trust you to prioritize anything beyond what benefits you in the moment." That landed. He stepped back slightly. "You're proving my point," he said. "You have no passion." I almost smiled. Passion without loyalty is just chaos. For a second, he looked like he wanted to argue. Then, he didn't. He just stood there, quiet, as if he was finally realizing something he couldn't reverse. When he walked out of the building, he didn't look back. And I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't, because there was someone else. His older brother, Samuel Carter. He had come with him the day he moved out. Quiet, observant. The kind of person who didn't fill silence just to avoid it. He carried most of the boxes. Didn't comment when Daniel made small remarks under his breath. Didn't laugh at me. That alone made him different. A few days after the office incident, he texted me. "I don't want to be on the middle," he wrote, "but I think you deserve to know. This didn't start with that night." I read the message twice. Then I replied, "What do you mean?" There was a pause. Then, they'd been talking for months. Late calls, private conversations. It wasn't physical at first, but it wasn't innocent either. I stared at the screen, not surprised. Just confirmed. "Thank you for telling me," I wrote back. "I'm sorry," he replied, "for how everything happened." "You don't owe me anything," I said. "Maybe not," he wrote, but I still wanted to say it. After that, we didn't talk much. Just occasional messages. Neutral. Careful. But something had shifted. Not emotionally. Not yet. Just awareness. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel's brand unraveled publicly. The website eventually went dark. Social media slowed, then stopped. People moved on faster than he expected. They always do. He tried reaching out once more. Different email. Different tone. "You sabotaged my life," he wrote. "If you had supported me through one mistake, none of this would have happened." I read it, then closed it. The truth was simpler than that. I removed my infrastructure. The rest collapsed because it was never independent. And that was never my responsibility. I didn't respond to Daniel's email, not because I was trying to punish him, but because there was nothing left to clarify. Some endings don't need closure. They just need distance. A few days after that message, Samuel reached out again. "Do you want to grab coffee?" he asked. Neutral ground. I've been dealing with family fallout. I hesitated, not because I thought it was inappropriate, because I understood the weight of it. But I also understood something else. Closure doesn't always come from the person who hurt you. Sometimes it comes from someone who saw it happen and didn't agree with it. So I said yes. We met at a small place near the water. Nothing curated, no performance. He showed up straight from work. Tired eyes, simple clothes, real. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Better than expected," I said. He nodded like he believed that. Then he asked me something I hadn't been expecting. "Did you ever feel like you had to shrink so he could feel bigger?" I didn't answer immediately, because the question wasn't simple, but the answer was. "Yes," I said. He exhaled slowly. "Me too," he said quietly. That conversation lasted 2 hours. Not about Daniel. Not really. About patterns. About people who confuse attention with value. About what it feels like to constantly adjust yourself to maintain someone else's image. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was defending my stability. I just existed. After that, we didn't suddenly become close. No dramatic shift. No emotional declarations. We talked occasionally, once a week, sometimes less. No flirting. No intention behind it. Just consistency. And that was enough. Samuel didn't perform ambition. He lived responsibility. 12-hour shifts, early mornings, quiet routines. No audience. No need for validation. About a month after Daniel moved out, his company officially paused operations. The website went offline. Social accounts stopped posting. I didn't check. I didn't need to. People mentioned it, casually, like it was just another brand that didn't make it. He tried contacting me one last time. Different email, different angle. "If you had stayed," he wrote, "none of this would have happened." I didn't respond, because that wasn't true. If I had stayed, it just would have taken longer. A few weeks later, I ran into Samuel again, at a family birthday. His mother had invited me directly. I debated not going, but she had always treated me with kindness. So I went, just for an hour. Daniel was there. He avoided eye contact. Ryan wasn't. At one point, Daniel pulled Samuel aside in the kitchen. They argued quietly. I didn't hear the words, but I saw the dynamic. Him pointing. Samuel standing still, not reacting. That told me everything. Later that night, he texted me. He said I betrayed him, he wrote, by talking to you. I read it, then replied, "Are you comfortable continuing to see me, even casually?" There was a pause. Then, "I'm tired of living according to his emotional storms." That was the moment something shifted. Not dramatically, just honestly. 2 weeks later, he came over for dinner. Nothing elaborate. I cooked. We sat at the same kitchen table where Daniel and I used to have business discussions. But this time, there was no tension, no performance. Just conversation. We talked about what this would mean. Openly. "If we move forward," I said, "it won't be hidden." He nodded. "I don't want hidden. No triangulation, no secrecy." "I'm not interested in that," he said. I studied him for a moment. "You're sure?" I asked. "Because this will get complicated." He met my eyes. "It already is." That was enough. The next weekend, we went to a public art event in Tampa. Not a date, just visible. A mutual friend saw us. By Monday, Daniel knew. He called from a blocked number. I answered once. I thought it might be something practical. It wasn't. You're predictable, he said immediately, in the worst way. I didn't interrupt. You couldn't attract someone new, he continued, so you settled for my brother. I let him finish. Because people like him need to hear themselves. Then I spoke. I didn't choose your brother to compete with you, I said calmly. I chose him because he doesn't need an audience to feel valuable. Silence. Then, you're destroying my family. And no, I replied, you made your choices, I made mine. He said my name again, sharper this time. But I had already made my decision. I ended the call, blocked the number, and that was the last time we spoke. It's been 8 months now. Samuel and I are still together. Slow, stable. No brand launches, no curated narratives. He works his shifts. I work mine. We eat dinner without anyone trying to win. Daniel's company never relaunched. Ryan moved to another city for a development project. I haven't heard from him since. And honestly, I don't think about them much anymore. Because the truth is simple. If being boring means consistent, loyal, and unwilling to finance my own disrespect, then I'm comfortable with that. Some people confuse chaos with excitement. I don't. My name is Victoria Blake. I'm 32 years old. And the moment I finally understood my relationship was already over didn't come with a fight, or a confession, or even a raised voice. It came with a suitcase. My boyfriend packed his things overnight and told me, I can't handle this right now. I need time to think. At the time, I didn't realize those words had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with calculation. On paper, Ethan and I made sense. We lived in a small rented apartment not far from the city center. Nothing impressive, but practical, close to both of our workplaces, the kind of place that worked. That's how most people would have described us too. We worked. I had a stable routine, normal office hours at a mid-sized tech company. Evenings were predictable. Sometimes the gym, sometimes cooking at home. I liked structure. I liked knowing where things were headed. Ethan didn't. He was more fluid, more expressive, the kind of man who could walk into a room and immediately shift the energy without trying. He called it adaptability. I used to admire that. We had been together just over 3 years, living together for about 18 months. We split everything evenly. Rent, utilities, groceries. It wasn't passionate or chaotic. It was steady. And for a long time, I thought steady meant safe. Ethan liked that part of my life. The stability, the predictability. He talked about the future constantly, buying property, building something secure, making sure we were financially comfortable. He had a very clear picture of what life should look like. Looking back, I realize now, that picture only worked if nothing went wrong. About 8 months ago, everything did. My company collapsed almost overnight. It wasn't a startup anymore, but it wasn't a giant corporation either. Somewhere in the middle, stable enough that I had spent nearly 6 years there building my career, trusting the structure, investing in stock options, until it unraveled in less than 2 weeks. Management had been hiding serious financial problems. When investors pulled out, the entire system collapsed with it. Just like that, I lost my job. And most of the savings I had tied into the company disappeared along with it. I was stressed, obviously. But I wasn't panicking. The same week it happened, I updated my resume, reached out to contacts, started applying to new positions. My plan was simple: reduce spending, focus on job hunting, recover as quickly as possible. A problem with a solution. Ethan didn't see it that way. At first, he just seemed irritated. He kept asking how something like this could even happen, whether I had missed warning signs, whether I had been too comfortable, too trusting. Within a few days, the tone changed. The questions turned into comments. I always thought that company felt unstable. This is exactly why I don't like relying on things that look too comfortable. And then slowly it became something else entirely. This situation is affecting both of us. This isn't the life I signed up for. I remember standing in the kitchen one evening, listening to him talk about uncertainty like it was something contagious. Like I was something contagious. Still, we weren't fighting. Not really. No raised voices, no dramatic confrontations, just a quiet shift in how he looked at me, like I had become a problem he didn't want to solve. Then one morning, I woke up and immediately noticed something was wrong. Ethan's suitcase was open on the bed. At first, I thought he was just organizing something. He sometimes traveled for work, and it wasn't unusual for him to pack late or early, depending on his schedule. But this wasn't that. The large suitcase was already half full. Not the small weekend bag, the big one, the one he only used for longer trips. Clothes were folded across the bed. His laptop was packed, shoes lined up neatly by the door. I sat up slowly, still trying to process what I was seeing. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't stop packing. "I'm thinking about staying with a friend for a while." The words landed strangely. There hadn't been some huge fight. No breaking point. Just this. "For how long?" I asked. He sighed like the question itself was exhausting. Then he finally looked at me. "I can't handle this situation right now, Victoria. I need time to think." At first, I thought he meant a few days. Space. Something temporary. That would have made sense. But the more he packed, the clearer it became that this wasn't a short break. He was taking everything. Clothes, shoes, even small personal things he usually never bothered moving. The kind of details that don't matter for a weekend, but matter for something longer. I asked him directly, "Are you breaking up with me?" Ethan rolled his eyes slightly. "You're being dramatic." He said he wasn't ending the relationship. He just needed distance while I figured out my situation. My situation. The way he said it felt clinical, detached, like he was describing a temporary inconvenience instead of my life falling apart. I reminded him I had already started applying for jobs, that things like this happen, especially in tech. He shrugged. "Maybe, but it's not what I signed up for." Something in my chest tightened. "What does that mean?" He kept folding clothes as he answered. "It means I don't want to be tied to someone who might be financially unstable for months." He said it calmly, like he was explaining a scheduling conflict. And something about that flipped a switch in my head. Up until that moment, I had assumed he was reacting emotionally. Stress makes people say things they don't mean. But this? This wasn't emotional. It was deliberate. I sat there on the edge of the bed, watching him move around the room like this was just another task on his list. "What exactly do you expect me to do?" I asked quietly. "Companies collapse. It's not like I planned this." He shrugged again. "That might be true, but the result is still the same. No job, no savings, uncertainty." He used that word again. Uncertainty, like it was the worst possible outcome. I reminded him that we had always split everything evenly, that I still had enough savings to cover several months without any issue. He waved it off. "That's not the point." Of course it wasn't. "The point is, I don't want to wake up every day wondering if you'll still be unemployed 6 months from now." I stared at him. "Do you really think I'm just going to sit around and do nothing?" He gave me a look that felt dismissive. "I don't know what you'll do," he said. "Your judgment about your last company wasn't exactly great." That one hit harder than anything else. 6 years of work, late nights, promotions, building something real. And suddenly, it was reduced to bad judgment. He zipped the suitcase. "I just need time to think," he said again. "Being around this right now is too stressful." This, not me. This. 10 minutes later, the second suitcase was packed. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet as he moved around, collecting the last of his things. A few more bags by the door, his laptop, a box with things he used for work. This hadn't been a decision he made that morning. He had been thinking about this for days. Maybe longer. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Staying with a friend," he said. "Just for now. Just for now." But people don't pack half their life for just for now. "How long?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "I don't know. That's the problem." Everything about my life was uncertain now, and he needed distance from that. Before he walked out, he repeated it one more time. "I can't handle this right now. Maybe once things stabilize, we can talk again." Like the relationship had just been paused. Like I was something to revisit later, if I became stable again. He dragged the suitcase into the hallway. I stood by the kitchen counter, watching, trying to decide if I should argue, if I should fight for this. But something inside me had already gone quiet. So I didn't. He opened the door, pulled the suitcase out, and left. He didn't look back. The door closed behind him. And just like that, Ethan was gone. The first thing I noticed after Ethan left was the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that settles in after something breaks and doesn't quite know how to fill the space it used to occupy. His side of the closet was almost empty. A few hangers. One old jacket he probably forgot. A pair of worn sneakers near the corner. Everything else, gone. The kitchen felt different, too. Ethan used to leave things everywhere. Coffee cups, protein shakers, half-finished notes from work calls. It used to irritate me in small, manageable ways. Now the counters were clean. Too clean. For about an hour, I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at nothing in particular, replaying the morning in my head like there was something I had missed. 3 years. And it ended in less than 2 hours. No cheating. No screaming. No dramatic scene. Just a job loss and a decision. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "I hope you understand this isn't personal. I just need space to figure things out. I can't deal with the stress of your situation right now. That phrase again, your situation. I read the message 3 times. What bothered me wasn't that he left. It was how easily he reframed everything, as if the relationship hadn't been affected, only temporarily paused. Like he was stepping away from a project that had become inconvenient. He added one more line. I don't want to cut communication completely. Let's stay in touch and see where things stand once everything settles. Once everything settles. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I did what I had already planned to do before any of this happened. I opened my laptop, checked my finances again, canceled a few subscriptions I didn't need. Then I went back to job applications. Because whether Ethan stayed or left, the situation still needed to be handled. And if I'm being honest, something shifted quietly inside me that afternoon. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just a small, clear realization. If someone leaves the moment life becomes inconvenient, you learn exactly how they see you. The next few weeks were some of the most focused weeks I've ever had. I treated finding a job like a full-time job. Every morning I was up by 8. Coffee, laptop, applications. I reached out to former coworkers, recruiters, old managers, anyone who might know about openings. In tech, people like to pretend networking doesn't matter. It does, and I used every connection I had. During that time, Ethan and I barely spoke. He sent a message maybe once every week or so. Always the same tone. Neutral. Detached. How's the job search going? Any interviews yet? Hope you're doing okay. At first, I responded normally. Short answers. Nothing emotional. Yes, I've had a few interviews. Still applying. Things are moving. But after a while, I noticed something. He never asked how I felt. Not once. It was always about progress. Results. Movement. Like he was tracking something. Not caring about it. Tracking it. And slowly, the conversation started to feel transactional. Like I was giving updates to someone who was waiting for a status change. Around week 4, I stopped responding as quickly. Not intentionally. I just didn't feel the urgency anymore. Because somewhere between the silence in the apartment and those carefully neutral messages, something had already started to detach. About 6 weeks after he left, I got my first serious opportunity. A cybersecurity company. Structured, stable, growing. The kind of place Ethan would have approved of. The process moved quickly. 2 interviews turned into 4. Each one more technical, more detailed. I prepared like it was the only thing that mattered. Because in that moment, it kind of was. And then, one afternoon, they made an offer. The salary was higher than my previous job. Not dramatically. But enough. Enough to recover what I had lost within a year or 2. Enough to rebuild. I didn't hesitate. I signed the contract the same day. I remember sitting at the kitchen table afterwards, staring at the email confirmation on my screen. Same table, same apartment, same quiet. But everything felt different. Because by that point, something had become very clear to me. The worst part of everything that happened wasn't losing the job. It wasn't even losing the savings. It was seeing how quickly someone could walk away when things stopped being easy. And that kind of clarity doesn't go away. 2 weeks later, I started the new job. The difference was immediate. The company was structured, transparent, organized. No hidden chaos behind the scenes. No sudden instability waiting to collapse everything. Within the first month, I felt steady again. My routine came back. Work during the day, gym in the evening, cooking at home. But this time there was no background tension, no quiet judgment, no feeling like I was being evaluated based on how stable my life looked. Financially, things improved faster than I expected. The new salary helped. My expenses had dropped after Ethan left. I kept the apartment for a while. It didn't make sense to break the lease early, but overall, everything felt manageable, calm. During that time, Ethan still sent occasional messages, every couple of weeks. Still polite, still casual. How are things going? Any updates? What's the job market like? What he didn't know was that I had already signed a new contract by the time his last message came in. I didn't tell him. Not immediately. Part of me wanted to. But another part of me was waiting. Waiting to see something. Anything. An acknowledgement. An apology. A conversation about what actually happened the morning he left. But it never came. Weeks passed. And that conversation never happened. Then one evening, about 3 months after he walked out, my phone lit up with a message that felt different. Longer. More deliberate. I've been thinking a lot about us lately. I read the first line and already knew where it was going. The time apart has given me some perspective. Of course it had. I missed the stability we had. I was wondering if we could talk. Maybe meet in person. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. Because the timing was almost perfect. By that point, my new job was stable. My finances were recovering. My life had settled again. And suddenly, he wanted to reconnect. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a suggestion, like nothing had really ended. Like everything had just been waiting, paused. And that was the moment something inside me clicked into place completely. Because from his perspective, maybe the relationship had been paused. But from mine, it had ended the morning he packed those suitcases. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. When Ethan sent that message about wanting to reconnect, I didn't respond right away. Not because I was confused. By that point, I wasn't. If anything, I had never been clearer. I just wanted to see what he would do next. 2 days passed. Then another message appeared. Hey, not sure if you saw my last text. I've been thinking a lot about us. I really think we should talk. I read it slowly, letting each word settle. Still no apology. Still no acknowledgement of what actually happened. Just vague language. Thinking, perspective, time apart. Carefully chosen words that avoided responsibility. So instead of agreeing to meet, I replied. But not the way he probably expected. I told him the job situation had already been resolved, that I had accepted a new position weeks earlier. Cybersecurity company, stable structure, better salary. I kept the message simple, factual, no emotion. His response came almost immediately. That's amazing, Victoria. I'm really happy for you. I stared at the screen for a moment after reading it, because there it was, exactly what I had been waiting to confirm. Relief. Not for me, for the situation. And in that moment, everything aligned perfectly. So I sent one more message, longer this time. Clear, direct. I told him that the morning he packed his suitcases and walked out had answered a question I didn't even realize I should have been asking. What someone does when life becomes inconvenient. I explained that when my company collapsed, I did what most people do. I adapted, updated my resume, reached out to my network, worked through the problem step by step. Because that's what stability actually looks like. Not the absence of problems, but the ability to handle them. Then I told him what I had realized about him. That when things stopped being comfortable, he removed himself. Quietly, efficiently, without hesitation. And that kind of reaction doesn't come from confusion. It comes from clarity. His clarity. I wrote that if a relationship only works when everything is financially secure, then it was never a real partnership to begin with. It was an arrangement. One that lasts only as long as conditions remain ideal. I paused for a moment before finishing the message, because the last part mattered. Not emotionally, just factually. I told him he had been right to leave. That sentence alone probably caught him off guard. But then I explained why. Because the day he walked out was the day the relationship ended for me. I just didn't say it out loud at the time. After I sent the message, I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. I blocked his number, then his social media, one decision, and then silence. No argument. No back and forth. No attempt to explain further. Just done. For the first few days after that, I half expected something. An email. A message from another account. Some kind of attempt to reopen the conversation. People don't usually lose access quietly, especially when they're used to having it, but nothing came. Either he understood exactly what I meant, or he simply decided it wasn't worth the effort once he realized the situation had changed. And honestly, either explanation made sense. Life moved forward quickly after that. Work kept me busy. The new company was everything my previous one wasn't. Structured, transparent, stable, the kind of environment where problems didn't hide until they exploded. Within a few months, I had rebuilt most of what I lost financially. Not all of it, but enough that the damage no longer felt permanent. The apartment changed too. At first, it felt empty, unfinished, like something was missing. But over time, I started to notice something else. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm. There were no passive comments about money, no subtle pressure about stability, no feeling like my value was tied to how secure my life looked on paper. It was just mine. Looking back, the most surprising part of everything wasn't how it ended. It was how clearly it revealed itself. Before the company collapsed, I genuinely believed we were building something real. 3 years of routines, shared space, future plans. It creates a kind of illusion, a convincing one. But pressure has a way of stripping that illusion down to what's actually there. When things were easy, Ethan was fully invested, present, engaged. But the moment uncertainty appeared, he packed 2 suitcases and walked out without hesitation. And once you see something like that clearly, you can't unsee it. Which is why when he came back months later, acting like everything had simply been paused, the decision wasn't difficult. It was obvious. Some things you only need to understand once. It's been about 8 months since the morning Ethan packed his suitcases and walked out of that apartment. 8 months sounds like a long time, but when I think about it now, it doesn't feel heavy anymore. It feels precise, like everything that needed to be revealed was revealed in exactly the way it had to be. The job situation that started all of it turned out to be temporary. The new position worked out better than I expected. Better structure, better leadership, better long-term opportunities. Financially, I stabilized faster than I thought I would. Within a few months, I had rebuilt most of what I lost. And more importantly, I trusted my own decisions again. That part mattered more than the money, because for a while, after everything collapsed, there was a quiet question in the back of my mind. Had I missed something? Had I been too comfortable? Too confident? Ethan's words had planted that doubt carefully. Your judgment wasn't great, but time and results answered that for me. The company didn't collapse because I made a bad decision. It collapsed because the people running it hid the truth. There's a difference, and understanding that difference gave me something back that I didn't even realize I had lost. Clarity. The apartment changed too. At first, I kept it because it was practical. Breaking the lease early didn't make sense. But over time, it stopped feeling like a place we used to share. It became mine. I rearranged things, moved furniture, cleared out the last traces of him that had been easy to ignore but impossible to unsee. The kitchen, especially, felt different. It used to feel like a shared space. Now it felt quiet, controlled, peaceful. And that silence that once felt sharp and uncomfortable became something else entirely. It became relief. No tension, no subtle pressure, no constant awareness of being evaluated based on how stable my life looked at any given moment. Just space. Just calm. Just me. Looking back now, the most important part of everything that happened wasn't the breakup itself. It was what it showed me. Before all of this, I believed stability in a relationship came from shared plans, talking about the future, living together, building routines, and those things matter. But they're not the foundation. They're the surface. Real stability only shows up when something goes wrong. Anyone can stay when life is predictable. Steady income, comfortable routines, no pressure. That's easy. The real test is what happens when uncertainty shows up, when things shift, when control disappears. When my company collapsed, my instinct was simple. Fix it, adapt, move forward. Ethan's instinct was just as clear. Leave, create distance, wait until things became comfortable again. And once I saw that, really saw it, it changed everything. Because relationships aren't partnerships if one person quietly exits the moment conditions become inconvenient. They're arrangements, temporary ones. And arrangements don't survive reality. Blocking him wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even difficult. It was just the logical conclusion. He made his decision the morning he left. I just accepted it later. Since then, life has been straightforward. Work is steady. My routine is calm again. Mornings feel predictable in the best way. Evenings feel quiet without feeling empty. And the apartment finally feels like a place where I can breathe. If there's one thing I took from all of this, it's this. When people show you how they respond to difficult moments, believe them the first time. Not when they come back. Not when they explain. Not when they try to rewrite what happened. The first reaction is the honest one. Everything after that is adjustment. Ethan didn't leave because he was confused. He didn't leave because he needed time. He left because in that moment, staying didn't benefit him. And that kind of truth doesn't need interpretation. It just needs acceptance. So when he came back months later, talking about perspective and missing what we had, it wasn't tempting. It wasn't complicated. It was clear. Because by then, I understood something I hadn't fully understood before. Some people don't leave relationships. They exit situations. And once the situation improves, they try to return. But relationships don't work like that. At least not real ones. And that's why I didn't open the door again. Because some things, once seen clearly, don't need a second chance. They need a conclusion. My name is Gabriella Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a logistics technician for a regional maintenance contractor in Phoenix. My life runs on structure. Not because I lack emotion, but because structure keeps everything contained. Predictable. Clean. It's how I make sense of things when they start to blur. Most of my days are practical. Systems, schedules, breakdowns that need fixing before they become bigger problems. I deal with things people don't usually notice until something goes wrong. I've never been embarrassed by that. Daniel Carter is different. He's 32, works in public relations for a hospitality group. His life doesn't follow a schedule, it flows. Late nights, networking events, conversations that stretch longer than they should, moments that don't always have clear edges. Where I build systems, he builds impressions. At the beginning, I thought that contrast made us stronger. Balance, we called it. We had been together just over 4 years, living together for 2. No kids, a shared routine that looked stable from the outside, even if it wasn't always as seamless as it seemed. The situation that started everything happened about 2 months ago. Daniel invited me to a small staff gathering at one of the restaurants his company managed. It was informal, something about closing early for staff appreciation. He sounded excited, almost eager for me to meet the people he worked with. I don't usually go to those kinds of events, but I said yes. I came straight from work that evening. I hadn't changed. Still wearing my work boots, my company shirt, hair tied back in a way that made sense for long days, but not for social rooms filled with polished conversations. I noticed the difference immediately when I walked in. The lighting was softer than it needed to be. Conversations layered over each other in a way that felt practiced. Everyone looked intentional. And then there was me. At one point, we were standing near the bar with 3 of his coworkers. Someone asked what I did for work. Before I could answer, Daniel laughed. Not loudly, not aggressively, just enough. She's basically the person you call when everything breaks and nobody else can figure it out, he said. Like, if your whole system goes down, she's the one fixing it behind the scenes. Everyone laughed. On the surface, it sounded harmless, almost like a compliment if you didn't listen too closely. But I did, because it wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. The slight tilt of his head, the way he glanced at them afterward, waiting for that reaction, the subtle shift that turned something factual into something lighter, smaller. Like my work wasn't something to state plainly. It needed to be packaged, framed, softened into something easier to digest. I didn't react. I just smiled, then explained my job in a straightforward way. Logistics systems, infrastructure coordination, maintenance contracts across multiple properties. The conversation moved on, but that moment stayed with me the entire night. Not because of the words, because of the intention behind them. On the drive home, Daniel was in a good mood. He talked about work, about how things were picking up, about potential expansions and opportunities. His energy filled the car like nothing had happened, like I hadn't noticed. When we got home, I didn't wait. Why did you say it like that? I asked. He looked at me, confused for half a second. Say what? My job, I said. Why turn it into a joke instead of just saying what I do? He laughed. Not cruelly, not sharply, just dismissively. Gabriella, come on, he said. It was just a joke. I held his gaze. It didn't feel like one. He shook his head, walking past me toward the kitchen like the conversation was already over. You're overthinking it. That word settled in the room. Overthinking. I followed him. If someone asked about you at my workplace, would you want me to describe you like that? He paused, then turned slightly. It's not the same. How? He hesitated. Just long enough. People in my industry care about image, he said finally. It's just how things are. Something about that answer stayed with me, because it wasn't really an explanation. It was a justification. I didn't push further that night. I told myself it was small, not worth turning into something bigger. But after that, I started paying attention. And once you start noticing patterns, it becomes impossible to unsee them. After that night, nothing changed on the surface. Daniel still came home late some evenings, still told stories about work with that same effortless confidence, still moved through conversations like everything fit exactly where it was supposed to. But something in me had shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice. Just awareness. I started listening more carefully, watching small moments I would have ignored before. And once I did, the pattern wasn't subtle anymore. It showed up in the way he described things about our life, depending on who he was talking to. If someone asked where we lived, he would say we were in between places, deciding what area to settle in long term. It sounded intentional, forward-moving. Technically, it wasn't a lie. But we weren't actively looking to move. We had renewed our lease 3 months earlier. If someone asked about my work, he rarely said it directly. He'd say I worked with systems or operations or infrastructure coordination. Words that sounded more polished, less grounded. At first, I thought he was simplifying. Then I realized he was editing, shaping, removing anything that didn't fit the version of himself he wanted, reflected back. About 2 weeks after the restaurant gathering, he brought a couple of coworkers home after a late shift. It was close to midnight. I had work early the next morning, so I stayed for about 15 minutes, just enough to be polite, introduce myself, sit through the beginning of whatever conversation was forming. One of them asked how Daniel and I met. Before I could answer, he jumped in. Through mutual friends, he said smoothly. Back when she was already working across multiple commercial properties. That part was true. But then he added, with that same tone I had started to recognize, "She basically keeps half the city running behind the scenes." They laughed. Again. It wasn't the exact same joke as before, but it landed the same way. I noticed one of them glance down at my boots, then back at Daniel. A quick, almost unconscious movement. That moment told me everything. Not about them. About him. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, excused myself, and went to the bedroom. But I didn't fall asleep right away. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over, trying to understand something that no longer felt accidental. Because once might be a joke, twice starts to look like intention. And intention says something about how someone sees you when they think it matters. A week later, it happened again. This time it was quieter, smaller. Just two of his coworkers stopping by for a quick drink after a shift. I was still awake, sitting at the table finishing up some paperwork from earlier that day. One of them asked how long we'd been together. Daniel answered normally. 4 years, living together for 2. Then the same coworker turned to me. "And what do you do?" Before Daniel could speak, I answered. "I'm a logistics technician. I manage systems and maintenance coordination for multiple commercial properties. Simple, direct, accurate." Daniel smiled slightly, then let out a small laugh. "Yeah, she's basically the one you call when everything starts falling apart," he added. "Like if nothing else works, she fixes it." They laughed. I didn't. I looked at him, not angry, not raising my voice, just steady. That's not really accurate," I said calmly. "I manage full operational systems across multiple sites. It's more than just fixing things when they break." The room went quiet, just for a second. One of his coworkers nodded slowly. "That actually sounds pretty solid." Daniel's expression shifted. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't notice. But I did, because I was looking for it now. The slight tightening around his eyes. The pause before he smiled again. He didn't say anything in that moment. The conversation moved on. Drinks finished. They left not long after. But the second the door closed, he turned to me. "Why did you have to make that awkward?" His tone wasn't loud, but it was sharp. I held his gaze. "I didn't make anything awkward. I explained what I actually do." "You corrected me in front of them," he said. "That's unnecessary." "Why?" I asked. "Because I described my own job accurately?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Gabriella, sometimes you just have to keep things light." I felt something settle into place at that moment. "Light," I repeated. He nodded. "Exactly. So light means turning my work into a joke?" "That's not what he started, then stopped, clearly frustrated. "You're doing it again. You're overthinking something small." There it was again. Small. Overthinking. The same language. The same dismissal. And suddenly, it wasn't confusing anymore. Because the problem wasn't that he didn't understand. It was that he didn't see anything wrong with it. I leaned back slightly, studying him in a way I hadn't before. "Let me ask you something," I said quietly. He didn't respond, just waited. "If it's such a small thing, why do you keep doing it after I've told you it bothers me?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a second, there was nothing. No explanation. No justification. Just silence. I didn't push further. I didn't need to. Because in that silence, I had my answer. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. And patterns don't come from nowhere. They come from how someone actually sees things when they're not trying to explain themselves. That night, something changed in me. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. Because once you realize someone is comfortable reducing you for the sake of how they're perceived, you start to question everything that came before it. And more importantly, everything that comes after. About a month after that second conversation, Daniel told me he had to travel for work. One of the restaurants his company managed was opening a new location outside Phoenix. They needed experienced staff to help set things up, train the new team, make sure everything ran smoothly before the official launch. He was excited. I could hear it in the way he talked about it. The energy, the way his voice lifted slightly when he described the opportunity. It mattered to him. And I understood that. I had always respected his ambition. "Just a few days," he said, standing in the doorway while I folded laundry that evening. "Maybe a week, depending on how things go." I nodded. "That's good." He watched me for a second like he was expecting more, a bigger reaction, something warmer. But I kept my tone steady, neutral. Because at that point, something inside me had already started to detach. Not emotionally exactly, just logically. We weren't arguing anymore. On the surface, things had settled. But underneath, the earlier conversations hadn't resolved anything. They had just clarified things, clarified how he saw the situation, clarified how I felt about it, and more importantly, clarified what that meant for the future. The night before he left, I helped him pack. Shirts folded neatly, shoes placed carefully in his bag, toiletries organized the way he liked them. We moved around each other in a quiet rhythm that felt almost normal. Almost. Every now and then he would say something about the trip, what he expected, who he'd be working with, how busy it might get. I listened, responded when it made sense. But my mind wasn't really in the conversation. It was somewhere else, running through the same thought over and over. If respect has to be explained more than once, is it really there? The morning he left, I drove him to the airport. Traffic was light, the sky just starting to brighten as the sun came up over the city. He talked the whole way. About work, about plans, about things that felt distant now, even though they were happening right in front of me. When we pulled up to the drop-off area, he grabbed his bag and turned toward me. "Call you when I land," he said, leaning in to hug me. I hugged him back. "Yeah, have a good trip," I replied. And that was it. No tension, no argument, just quiet. But as I watched him walk toward the entrance, something settled into place with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt before. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't reactive. It was resolved. On the drive back home, I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't check my phone. I just drove, thinking about one thing. If someone is comfortable making you smaller in front of others, what does that say about how they see you when it actually matters? By the time I pulled into the driveway, I had my answer. And once you have a clear answer, the next step becomes simple. I walked inside, set my keys on the counter, and made coffee. Then I sat at the kitchen table. The house was completely quiet. No background noise, no conversations, no distractions, just space. And in that space, I made a decision. I opened my laptop, searched for a local attorney. Phoenix had plenty. I picked one with solid reviews, straightforward experience, no unnecessary complications. I scheduled a consultation for that afternoon. The meeting was exactly what I expected. Clear, direct, efficient. I explained the situation. Not emotionally, not dramatically. Just facts. We weren't married, but we shared a lease, expenses, a life that had been built over several years. Ending it would still require structure. Division of belongings, shared accounts, logistics. Things I understood well. By the time I left this office, everything was already in motion. On the way home, I stopped at a hardware store, not for anything symbolic. Just boxes, packing tape, labels. When I got back to the house, I didn't hesitate. I started with the bedroom closet. Daniel had more clothes than I did, so that took the longest. I folded everything carefully, placed each item into boxes, organized by type. Shirts, pants, jackets, shoes. Nothing rushed, nothing careless. Because this wasn't about anger. It was about completion, one step at a time. The same way I approach a system that needs to be taken apart without damaging anything. Clothes first, then shoes. Then the bathroom, his side of the cabinet. Toiletries, personal items. Everything packed, labeled. By the end of the first evening, the guest room was half full. Daniel texted me that night. "Landed. Hotel looks decent," I replied. "Glad you got in safe." Nothing more. No tension. No indication of what was happening. Because there was no reason to create conflict before it was necessary. The next day I continued. The desk he used for work. Papers sorted and stacked. Electronics placed carefully into protective wrapping. Kitchen items that were clearly his, packed separately. Small things from the living room. Decorations he had chosen. Books he had brought into the space. Each item handled with the same care. Because if this ever turned into a dispute, I wanted everything to be clear. Nothing missing, nothing damaged, nothing that could be used to create unnecessary complications. By the second evening, the guest room was full. Boxes stacked neatly against the walls. 6 years of someone's presence, reduced to organized rows. It felt strange, not sad, not overwhelming, just quiet. Like finishing a long process that had been building for longer than I realized. On the legal side, things moved quickly. The paperwork was filed the same day as my consultation. The next step was timing. Daniel was scheduled to return Monday afternoon. Sunday night, I sealed the last box, stood in the doorway of the guest room for a moment, looking at everything, making sure nothing had been missed. Then I turned off the light and went to bed. Before I slept, I sent one final message to the attorney. We arranged for the documents to be delivered shortly after his flight landed. Clean, precise, no unnecessary overlap. Then I set my alarm for work, like any other night, because as far as I was concerned, the hardest part was already done. Monday afternoon, I was at work when Daniel landed. I knew the timing. He had mentioned his flight earlier in the week, casually, like everything else between us had been lately. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed. Just landed, waiting for luggage. I looked at the message for a second, then typed back, still finishing up a job, I'll be home later. Simple, neutral. About 40 minutes after that, I received a confirmation text from the process server. Documents delivered. That was the moment everything shifted. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Daniel, I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. By the third call, the text started coming in. Gabriella, what is this? Are these papers real? What the hell is going on? I didn't respond immediately. I finished what I was doing. Closed the system panel we had been working on. Logged the job properly. Followed the same steps I always did at the end of a workday. Routine. Structure. Control. By the time I checked my phone again, there were 9 missed calls. More messages. Longer now. Less controlled. I'm coming home. We need to talk. Is this some kind of joke? I read them once. Then I replied with a single message. This has already been explained. The paperwork outlines the next steps. After that, I turned my phone to silent. When I got home that evening, his car was already in the driveway. The front door was open. I could hear movement inside. I stepped in, closing the door quietly behind me. Daniel was standing in the hallway, just outside the guest room. All the boxes were exactly where I had left them. He was staring at them, not touching anything, just staring. Like he was trying to understand how something could change this much without him being there to see it happen. Then he turned toward me, and the first thing he said wasn't about the papers. Why did you pack my things? His voice wasn't loud. It was confused, disoriented. I set my keys down on the kitchen counter and walked toward him. Because the process already started, I said calmly. It's easier to organize everything now than during an argument later. He blinked, like he was trying to catch up to what I was saying. Then the confusion shifted into anger. Are you serious right now? He asked. You filed this without even talking to me again. We already talked, I said. I know we didn't, he snapped. Not like this. I held his gaze. We talked about the issue multiple times, I said. I told you it was disrespectful. You said I was overthinking it. That's not... He stopped himself, exhaling sharply. Gabriella, this is insane. You don't end a relationship over something like that. I tilted my head slightly. Over something like what? A joke, he said immediately. There it was. That word again. Joke. I nodded slowly. I'm not ending it over a joke, I said. Then what? He demanded. I gestured lightly toward him. Over what the joke represents. He stared at me, like the distinction didn't make sense, or didn't matter. It's the same thing, he said. No, I replied quietly, it's not. The hallway went still. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing once before turning back to me. Yeah, you're blowing this out of proportion, he said. Normal people don't do this. They talk. They work through things. I did talk, I said, more than once. And I told you it wasn't a big deal, he shot back. I let that sit for a second, then asked the same question I had asked before. If it wasn't a big deal, why did you keep doing it after I told you it bothered me? He opened his mouth, stopped. That same silence again. But this time it felt heavier, because now the consequences were already in motion. You're seriously doing all of this, he said finally, gesturing toward the boxes, because of how I introduced your job to people? I shook my head slightly. I'm doing this because you needed to make me smaller in front of others to feel comfortable in those moments. That's not true, he said immediately. Then explain it, I replied. He hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything I needed was already there. Because if there had been a real explanation, he would have given it. Instead, he deflected. This is ridiculous, he said. You're acting like I betrayed you or something. I held his gaze. You did, I said quietly. That seemed to hit something. Not anger. Something closer to disbelief. By making a joke, he asked. By showing me how you see me when it matters, I corrected. Silence filled the space again. Daniel looked past me, into the living room, like he was trying to reset the situation. Then back at the boxes. Then at me. You planned all of this while I was gone, he said. Yes. That answer landed harder than anything else. For a moment, he just stood there. Then he grabbed his keys from the table. I'm not staying here, he said. Not with you acting like this. I nodded once. That's fine. He walked toward the door, paused briefly near the guest room, looked at the boxes one more time, then shook his head and left. A minute later, I heard his car start, then fade down the street. The house went quiet. Completely quiet. I stood there for a few seconds, then walked into the kitchen, picked up my phone. More messages were already coming in. From him. Are you serious? We need to fix this. Call me. I read them, then blocked his number, Blocked the messaging apps, not out of anger, out of clarity, because the conversation was already over. Anything else would just be repetition. And repetition doesn't fix something that was never understood to begin with. The next few days were quiet. He tried reaching out from different numbers at first. Missed calls, short messages. I blocked those too. By midweek, my attorney confirmed he had hired one as well. From there, everything moved the way these things usually do. Structured, predictable, efficient. We didn't own the house. My car was in my name, his was in his. Our finances were mostly separate. There wasn't much to fight over. He scheduled a time to collect his things while I was at work. When I came home that evening, the guest room was empty. Just bare carpet, faint marks on the wall where the boxes had been stacked. That was the last physical trace of him in the house. After that, it was just paperwork, signatures, waiting periods, and then nothing. Looking back, I know how it sounds. A relationship ending over something that small, a single comment, a joke about fixing things. But it was never about the joke. It was about what the joke revealed. Respect doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes quietly, in small moments most people ignore. The way someone talks about you when others are watching, that tells you everything. I fix systems for a living. When something keeps failing over and over, you don't stand there hoping it will correct itself. You identify the fault. You isolate it. And if necessary, you remove it completely. My name is Genevieve Laurent. I'm 38 years old, and I work as a logistics supervisor for a regional distribution company in Charlotte. My life runs on structure, not because I'm rigid, but because structure keeps things clean, predictable, contained. Every morning, I'm out the door a little after 6. Every evening, unless something breaks at a site, I'm home before 5. I know what my days look like before they happen. I built it that way. 5 years ago, before Daniel and I moved in together, I bought my townhouse. Mortgage in my name, utilities in my name. Every bill accounted for, every expense tracked. Stability isn't something I hope for. It's something I design. Daniel Hayes is different. He's 36, works in public relations for a hospitality group. His schedule shifts, part office, part remote, part social events that blur into something less defined. Where I am structured, he's fluid. And at the beginning, I thought that balance made sense. We've been together 5 years, living together for 3. On paper, we work. In reality, it's more complicated. Daniel has a presence, the kind that fills a room without trying. People lean toward him when he talks. He knows how to read people, adjust his tone, make them feel seen. I used to admire that. At home, though, that same skill turns into something sharper. If dinner is late, it becomes a quiet comment about my time management. If I forget something small, it turns into a broader observation about how he carries the emotional weight of the relationship. It's never loud, never explosive, just consistent enough to make you question your footing. I'm not easy either. I know that. I don't entertain circular arguments. I don't soften things just to keep the peace. When there's a problem, I address it directly. Daniel prefers interpretation, tone, timing, implication. We speak different languages when it comes to conflict. About 3 months ago, he started mentioning someone, Sophie, his ex-girlfriend. At first, it was casual, almost dismissive. She still doesn't understand how this industry works, he said one night, scrolling through his phone, always asking for advice. I didn't think much of it. Exes exist, histories overlap, it's normal. But then the tone shifted, subtly. The kind of shift you don't notice unless you're paying attention. She's going through a lot right now, he said a week later. Breakups, career stuff, it's messy. Then, she's actually handling things better than I expected. Then, she's funnier than I remembered. It wasn't what he said. It was how often he said her name. One evening I asked him directly, not accusatory, just precise. Is there anything going on with you and Sophie that I should know about? Daniel laughed. Not nervously, not defensively, just lightly, like I'd asked something unnecessary. Jen, he said, shaking his head. You're overthinking. She's just someone I used to date. The delivery wasn't aggressive. It was dismissive, like the question itself didn't deserve weight. I let it go. Not because I believed him, but because pushing without information doesn't get you anywhere. About 6 weeks ago, he came home late. There had been a regional networking event, something he said would wrap mid-afternoon. He walked in close to 10. I was still awake. He looked irritated that I was. They kept us for debrief, he said, dropping his keys on the counter. You wouldn't understand how intense these things get. I didn't argue. Not that night. The next morning, I noticed the printed schedule he'd left on the kitchen counter. Final session, 4:15 p.m. Networking until 5. That was it. He'd texted me at 4:40. Wrapping up soon. Then nothing. until 9:12. On my way home, I didn't confront him. I verified. Same schedule online, same times. Out of curiosity, I checked the hotel's bar hours. Open late. That evening, I asked him how the debrief went. He shrugged. Boring. Metrics, internal stuff. Who stayed? I asked. Most of the team. A pause. Half a second. Small, but noticeable. Was Sophie there? I asked. He gave me a look. Obviously, she works there. His tone shifted when I asked follow-ups. Not accusations, just details. Who led the debrief? Where it happened? Which manager was involved? You're interrogating me, he said finally. It's exhausting. So I stopped. Not because I was satisfied, but because I had enough to know something didn't align. 2 days later, his phone lit up on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. I wasn't looking for it. But the screen kept lighting up. Same name. Sophie. 3 times in a row. No group chat, just her. When he came out, I asked, "Why is Sophie texting you at 10 on a Sunday?" He didn't hesitate. "She's going through a rough time," he said. "She needed someone to talk to." He said it like it was obvious, like he was doing something generous. I nodded slowly. "I'm not comfortable with that level of emotional intimacy," I said. "Not like this. Not this often." He rolled his eyes. "You're being territorial." "That's not what this is." "It's exactly what it is," he replied. "Men and women can talk without it being something inappropriate." What stayed with me wasn't the words. It was what wasn't there. No reassurance. No adjustment. No acknowledgement of how it looked. Just irritation that I had noticed. That was the moment something shifted for me. Not outwardly, internally. I stopped trying to interpret and started paying attention. I didn't confront him again after that. Not because the questions went away, but because I stopped needing answers from him. I started verifying things on my own, quietly, carefully. The following week, Daniel had a client dinner across town. He mentioned it casually that morning while pouring coffee, like it was just another entry in his schedule. "Should wrap around 8, he said. I nodded. "Want me to keep dinner warm?" He shook his head. "Don't wait up." At 7:15, I sent a simple message. "Do you want me to save anything for you?" No response. At 9:40, he texted back. "We're closing out the restaurant now. Be home soon." I stared at the message for a moment, then opened my browser. The restaurant he named closed at 9 o'clock on weekdays. When he got home, he looked relaxed, not rushed, not like someone who had just finished a long business dinner. "How was it?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Good," he said, slipping off his jacket. "Client's happy." "You stayed past closing?" He paused. They don't kick out big tables," he said a little too quickly. "We were spending a lot." Possible, but not consistent. The next morning, his blazer was draped over the chair in the dining room. The receipt was still in the pocket. 1 entree. 2 drinks. Timestamp 8:12 p.m. No group dinner, no extended meeting, no large tab. Just him. That was the first moment I felt it fully settle. Not anger, not even hurt. Just clarity. Something had already ended. 3 nights later, he fell asleep on the couch, his phone still in his hand. The screen lit up once before it dimmed again. Her name, Sophie. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the quiet hum of the house. I don't go through people's phones. I never have. Trust to me isn't about access. It's about consistency. But consistency was already gone, so I picked it up. Not to search, just to confirm. I opened the thread and scrolled to the most recent messages. They weren't subtle. Inside jokes I didn't recognize. References to nights that didn't match the schedule he gave me. And then, a line that stayed with me longer than anything else. It felt good to be wanted without being criticized. I didn't need context to understand that. That sentence was about me. I took a few photos of the thread with my own phone, set his phone back exactly where it had been, and turned off the lamp. I didn't wake him, didn't confront him, didn't cry, because at that point, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was processing. The next day, during my lunch break, I called an attorney. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just practically. She asked the kind of questions that strip a situation down to its structure. How long have you been together? 5 years. Living together? 3. Joint assets? Yes. Children? No. Whose name is on the property? Mine. There was a pause on the line. That simplifies some things, she said. We talked about accounts, shared finances, documentation. She didn't tell me what to do. She just explained what was possible and what mattered. Evidence, timing, clarity of intent. I appreciated that. Neutrality in moments like that feels more honest than comfort. Over the next week, Daniel's behavior shifted in small, noticeable ways. He kept his phone closer, took calls in the garage, turned the screen away when messages came in. And then he started accusing me. "You've been cold lately," he said one night. "I've been observant," I replied. He frowned. "That's not how relationships work, General. You don't just withdraw." "I'm not withdrawing," I said calmly. "I'm paying attention." He didn't like that answer. A few days later, when I declined sex, honestly, simply because I didn't feel comfortable, he sighed like I had inconvenienced him. "You're punishing me now?" No. "Then what is this?" "I don't feel connected right now." He shook his head. "You're making problems where there aren't any." That phrase again. Minimization. Reframing. Like reality was something flexible, depending on how he described it. A week later, he came home different. Lighter. Almost energized. He poured himself a glass of wine and leaned against the counter like he had something to celebrate. "I needed this," he said. "A break from all the tension." I watched him for a moment. Then I asked, directly, "Are you sleeping with Sophie?" He didn't answer right away. That pause. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't shock. It was calculation. And that told me everything before he even spoke. "Yeah," he said finally. Just like that. No hesitation after the pause. No visible regret. No discomfort. Just acknowledgement. "How long?" I asked. "A few weeks." "Where?" "Her place. Sometimes hotels if we're out of town." I nodded once. My hands were steady. My voice didn't change. Because anger would have given him something to respond to. Something to push against. And I wasn't interested in a fight. I was interested in truth. "Why?" I asked. He took a sip of wine, like this was a normal conversation. "She's easy," he said. "No pressure, no constant criticism." I let that settle. "And me?" I asked. He exhaled. "You're intense, General. Everything is structured, measured. It's exhausting sometimes." I didn't argue that. I asked one more question, the only one that mattered. "Do you care about her?" He shook his head almost immediately. "No." And then he said it, calmly, casually, like it simplified everything. It didn't mean anything. I never actually had real feelings for her. Something in me went quiet after that. Not broken, not shattered, just separated, cleanly. I looked at him for a long moment. "Explain that," I said. He shrugged. "It was physical, convenient. That's it. It's not like I'm in love with her." "So that makes it..." "What?" I asked. "Acceptable." "You're overreacting," he said, almost amused. "Adults separate sex from feelings all the time." I studied his face. "The certainty, the dismissal. If it didn't matter," I said slowly, "then you risk this relationship for something you don't even value." He laughed. Actually laughed. "You're being dramatic." That was the moment I understood. Not just what he had done, but how he thought. And once you understand someone's framework, you stop trying to fix it. After that conversation, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't ask him to choose, because there was nothing left to negotiate. What he said mattered more than what he did. It didn't mean anything. That wasn't a defense. It was a blueprint. It told me exactly how he measured consequences. So I stopped reacting like a partner and started thinking like someone closing a contract. That night, I moved into the guest room. No announcement, no discussion, just a quiet shift of space. He noticed, of course. "Seriously," he said from the doorway. "You're doing this now?" "I need distance," I replied, folding a blanket with deliberate precision. "You're overreacting," he repeated, like saying it enough times would make it true. "I'm making decisions," I said. "There's a difference." The next morning before work, I logged into our joint accounts. Checking, savings. I documented everything. Balances, timestamps, transaction history. Then I transferred exactly half into my personal account. Not more, not less. Half. When you move emotionally, you make mistakes. When you move precisely, you don't. By noon, my phone started lighting up. Daniel. Call after call. Voicemail after voicemail. I didn't answer. I was in a meeting. And I don't mix personal chaos with professional responsibility. When I finally listened later, the tone wasn't what people expect. Not regret. Not apology. Anger. "What the hell did you do?" His voice snapped through the speaker. "You don't just move money like that, General. That's not yours to take." I let the message finish before deleting it. When I returned his call, my tone matched his, but without the emotion. "It's marital property," I said. "Half is mine." "You're trying to control me financially." "No," I replied. "I'm separating assets." Silence. "Then, you're really going to blow this up over something that didn't even matter?" There it was again. The same logic. The same dismissal. "That's exactly why I am," I said, and ended the call. 2 days later, I met with my attorney in person. I brought everything. Screenshots of the messages. A written timeline. Dates, inconsistencies, patterns. Not because I needed to prove fault, but because clarity creates leverage. She reviewed everything without reaction. Then she looked up. "What do you want?" she asked. "Clean separation," I said. "No escalation, no drama, just done." She nodded. Then we proceed carefully. We drafted the paperwork, separation agreement, financial protections, and then she asked a question that most people hesitate on. "Do you want him served at home or at work?" I didn't answer immediately, not because I was unsure, but because I understood the weight of the decision. At home is private, controlled. At work is undeniable. No avoidance, no delay, just reality, delivered in a place where image matters. At work, I said, not for revenge, for certainty. In the days leading up to it, Daniel acted like nothing had changed, like I would cool off, like this was temporary. "I ended things with her," he said one evening, leaning against the kitchen counter, "because you're being irrational and I don't want drama." I didn't respond emotionally. "Did you tell her you misrepresented our relationship?" I asked. He frowned. "That's not your concern." That told me everything I needed to know. Nothing had ended. He was adjusting the narrative, not the behavior. That same night, I asked him, calmly, to explain again why it didn't count. He rolled his eyes but answered, confident, certain, unaware. I recorded the conversation on my phone, legally, quietly. On that recording, his voice is clear. I didn't have feelings, it was physical. You're blowing it out of proportion. I didn't interrupt him. I didn't challenge him. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone fully reveal themselves. The following week, everything moved into place. I closed our joint credit card, opened one in my name, transferred recurring payments, documented everything, clean, methodical, final. Service was scheduled for Valentine's Day, not intentionally, just the earliest available date. That morning, I went to work like any other day, reviewed reports, answered emails, walked job sites. At 10:17 a.m., Daniel was handed the papers at his office reception desk. At 10:19, my phone started ringing. I didn't answer. Not immediately. I was mid-conversation with a contractor, and I don't let personal decisions interfere with professional responsibility. By the time I checked my phone, there were 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and a string of messages. The first one, "What is this?" The second, "You serve me at work? Are you serious right now?" The third, "Call me, now." I stepped into my car before listening to the voicemail. His voice was tight, controlled, but barely. "Jen, this is unnecessary. You're making this bigger than it is. We can handle this privately." Not a single word about what he did. Only about how I responded. I let the message end. Then I sent one text. "All further communication goes through attorneys." And then I blocked his number, not out of anger, out of discipline. Within minutes, a call came from an unknown number. I declined it. Then another message. "You're really throwing this away over nothing?" Blocked. If he wanted to discuss assets, he had a channel. If he wanted to argue, I wasn't available. By late afternoon, my attorney confirmed service was complete. Financial protections in place. No sudden withdrawals. No asset manipulation. Everything. Contained. That night, I packed a small bag. Not because I was forced to leave, but because distance reduces volatility. I stayed with a colleague for a few days. Around 8 p.m., an email came through. Subject line, "We need to fix this." I didn't open it right away, because there was nothing left to fix. I read the email the next morning, not out of urgency, but out of habit. The subject line was the same. "We need to fix this." The message itself was controlled. Not emotional, not desperate, strategic. He said he had ended things with Sophie, that it had been a mistake, that it was physical and meaningless, that he realized I was the stable one, the one who showed up, the one who built something real. It didn't read like regret. It read like recalculation, like he had finally understood the cost and was trying to renegotiate after the fact. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to my attorney. That became the pattern. From that point forward, everything went through structure, process, documentation. Daniel didn't respect that boundary at first. Later that morning, I received a call from his sister. We weren't close, so I let it go to voicemail. Her tone was sharp, controlled, but edged with accusation. "Genevieve, this is extreme. He's devastated. You're acting like this is something unforgivable." That word again. Extreme. I listened to the message once. Then I sent it to my attorney. Within hours, a formal notice was issued requesting that third parties stop contacting me. The next message came directly from Daniel's lawyer, a request for a temporary meeting to discuss reconciliation before escalation. Reconciliation wasn't on the table. Not because I was angry, but because I was clear. That afternoon, Daniel emailed me again, longer this time, more detailed. He said he had cut all contact with Sophie, that it had meant nothing, that he hadn't realized how serious I would take it, that we could reset, start over. There was one line that stood out. I didn't think you'd actually leave over something like this. I read it twice. Then I replied once. Copied my attorney. Clear, measurable, contained. I stated that his admission of infidelity was documented. I stated that I would not pursue any external exposure as long as the separation proceeded without obstruction. I stated that I expected the townhouse, my townhouse, to be listed within 60 days, and that I was open to mediation for asset division. No emotion, just terms. He responded within minutes. What do you mean documented? I didn't answer that question. I didn't need to. That evening, a courier delivered an envelope to the townhouse. Inside was a flash drive. My attorney had approved it. Not as a threat, as clarity. It contained the recording. His voice. Calm, certain, explaining that it didn't count because he didn't have real feelings. I wasn't there when it arrived, but I knew when he listened. Because the next communication didn't come from him. It came from his attorney, requesting confirmation that no recordings would be distributed publicly. The tone had changed. For the first time, there was caution. After that, everything became procedural. No more emotional emails. No more attempts to call. Just schedules, documents, negotiation. In mediation, Daniel tried to reframe the narrative. He said we had both been distant, that I had been cold, that he had felt unseen. I didn't argue feelings. I stayed with facts. He admitted the relationship with Sophie had been physical. For several weeks, he admitted he concealed it. Intentionally. His attorney redirected him when he tried to minimize it, because minimization doesn't hold up under structure. We agreed to list the townhouse. The market was strong. We both walked away with equity. Accounts were divided. Cleanly. No court scenes. No public exposure. Just consequences. During a break in mediation, he approached me. Careful. Measured. Are you really willing to end everything without one more conversation? He asked. I looked at him, not with anger. Not with sadness. Just clarity. We already had it, I said. That didn't count, he replied quickly. I wasn't taking it seriously. I held his gaze for a moment. That's the problem, I said. The last time I saw him was at the title company. We signed the final documents across from each other. No raised voices. No apologies. Just paper moving across a table. At the door, he paused. I still think this didn't have to end like this, he said. I nodded once. It did. And then I walked out. It's been 8 months. I rent a smaller place now, closer to work. Fewer memories attached to the walls. Simpler. Cleaner. The dog stayed with me. That was one of the few decisions we made without friction. People have asked if I regret how final I was, if there was room to fix it. The answer is no, not because of what he did, but because of how he understood it. It wasn't the betrayal, it was the framework behind it. When someone tells you something doesn't count, because it didn't matter to them, believe that, because that's how they measure impact. I don't hate him. That surprises people. I just don't trust him. And without trust, there's nothing to rebuild. We haven't spoken since. No messages. No accidental run-ins. Charlotte is big enough for that. Last week, someone mentioned he's still at the same company. Different team. Sophie is gone. Transferred. I didn't ask questions. I don't need updates on a life I chose to leave. Sometimes I think back to that moment. The pause before he admitted it. Not with anger. With precision. That was the turning point. I asked a direct question. He chose a dismissive answer. Everything after that